All right. Okay. So, um, so again, just to recap on the lecture series, if this is the first time you're joining us, this lecture series is in its third year, hosted again by the Molokai Initiative, and also, at least for this year, Asian American Political Activation at UC Berkeley. The title of our lecture series, We Are Not Immigrants, Unsettling Asians in America, is inspired both by Hawaiian sovereignty activist and professor of Hawaiian studies, Haunani K. Trask's poem, Settler, Not Immigrants, as well as Native American Studies scholar Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book, Not a Nation of Immigrants. And what we do is that this series hosts discussions with members of the Asian diaspora on Turtle Island who are resisting settler colonialism through their work with indigenous communities, doing work in environmental justice or land stewardship. It also holds space for Asian American identified folks, since it is kind of the main audience for AKI and Asian American political activism, to listen and learn from the Native peoples whose lands have raised and sustained us. So I am very, very, very honored and pleased to introduce to you Wanda and Irenia Quitiqit, who are mixed race Native American, specifically Robinson Rancheria Band of Pomos, and Filipino, specifically Ilokano elders, as they share their stories from their growing up in the Central Valley. Their father was a Filipino manong who arrived on Turtle Island or the United States when the Philippines was under American colonial rule. Their mother was a Pomo woman from Clear Lake region who had been abducted at 7 years old and forced to attend a boarding school that the United States created to eradicate Native culture. In the midst of a hostile, dominant white culture, this couple raised their kids to embrace their cultures with pride. Both Wanda and Irenia Quitiqit play active roles in promoting and preserving Pomo art and culture. Listen to their stories. Of course, we're here today. And lessons on love and solidarity. So please join me in your virtual applause in welcoming Wanda and Irenia. I just want to share a really quick photo. This is an amazing photo of their father. So on the left, and I'll ask them, of course, about it, but you can see, I don't know if you can see how it was, this is a kind of the equivalent of his his passport. So you see that he entered the United States in 1922. So over a century ago, this document, we're so honored to be able to even have this historical document coming from the Ilocos region. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to Wanda and Irenia. So the first question that we're so interested in hearing you answer is just, when and how did your parents meet?
I guess I can go first. I'm Wanda Quitiqit. I'm the eldest surviving daughter of my parents right now. I'll be 79 in April. And I'm just really kind of glad to be around to do this. My parents met sometime around the late 1930s. Because my first brother the first son was born I think in 1940, because later on my sister came in 1942. So I think he was born, we were all a year apart, because my parents, when they met, it was in Lake County. You know, my father being an immigrant, he worked in the agricultural fields a lot. And that photo there is of him in his garden that he loved doing. And that's the bamboo he would cut that was growing on the levees where we lived out on Union Island in the Stockton, California area. And the pictures of my mom, Irenia here, my sister Irenia here, took that photo of her. And we're just really happy to have these photos of our parents. And they met in an area called Upper Lake in Lake County, California. My mother was just out of the boarding school. She basically, her and her sister, she had a brother and one sister surviving, and she and her sister were picked up or kidnapped from Lake County. when they were like, I think my mother was about 7 years old, and her sister was older. She had to have been about probably 9, something like that. Little girls, and picked up by some probably welfare people who were running the boarding school at that time, and driven to Oakland, and put on a train, and stopped in another boarding school in Southern California, Riverside, California. And that was kind of like a holding pin, I guess, for the kids, because then they had to decide where they were going to finally put them. My mother ended up going to Stewart, Nevada, and that was one of the other most notorious Native boarding schools that the government held there in Stewart, Nevada. So she spent most of her girlhood and teenage years in that school as incarcerated, basically. And when she came out, she came back to Lake County, and came back to a world of poverty and alcoholism and disease, and no jobs, no education. And that's how it was here in this beautiful Lake County for Native children at that time. So she met her first husband. She had to have been in her teens, and she had 3 children from him, and two survived, who are my beloved brother and sister. And then she met my father, who was working there in the pears first, and then green beans and hops, and those were the 3 big crops in Lake County at that time. And so he and many other Filipino men came through Lake County and settled here. My father, when he first came to Lake County, he also had an Indian wife, the first Indian wife, and she died. And then he met my mom, and I don't know how long they lived in Lake County before he took her to the San Joaquin Valley, where he worked in agriculture. And that's pretty much where I think one of my brothers was born in Upper Lake. My oldest brother, between my parents, was born in Upper Lake, and then the rest of us were all born in the San Joaquin area.
Can I note something?
Yes.
I'd like to note also in Lake County at that time, when in the 1930s and 1940s, there was a lot of the Filipinos and Indians were discriminated, and so they couldn't intermarry with white people. So I think that was probably one of the main reasons why they connected the Indians and the Filipinos, because it was both people, unless I married an other Indian person, but that's how my parents met, and they couldn't relate to any outside other types of people. So I just wanted to make that.
That's good, Irene, because Robyn, you would know more about the history of the Filipino experience here. There were laws in California where the Filipino men could not marry white women or be seen with a white woman. They suffered a lot of racism and discrimination because of who they were, and they couldn't bring their families here or bring a Filipino wife with them, because they were going to be working in the fields, and they had terrible housing, and all that sort of thing. So that's why my father and his the other young men who were with him, they were brothers. They were like brothers. They banded together. They went everywhere together, and did everything together. That was all they had. Was each other. And but the difference, I thought, when I seen pictures of my father, he's at his late wife's funeral, and he's in a tuxedo. And another picture I've seen of him, he's in a suit. And these Filipino men, I think they had a lot of class, and they had cars, and they dressed well when they were off work. They socialized, and so I think there was jealousy from that vigilante group that who I'm talking about. And my father and mother, I don't think they stayed long in Lake County when they met.
Yeah.
They just, they took off, and he took her to the San Joaquin Valley, where we were raised. Most of us were born in Stockton and raised out on the farm, an area called Union Island. it's a famous road, Clifton Court Road. And we lived at the very end of that, and the farmers there had thousands and thousands of acres of crops. And my father, he pretty much trained these two young Italian men who were wealthy at that time, and he brought them a lot of wealth in the way he set up the land and the irrigation and the plowing, laying out the land for the crops. And then plus my father had 7 sons. The surviving children were 7 girls and 7 sons, and none of the other farmers had sons like my father did. And I think they were kind of jealous of him. And so my brothers worked hard. We all were raised to be, we all had to work in the fields. We were all farm laborers. I was a farm laborer from 6 years old till I was like 15. And and today I have 2 brothers who still do farm work. And so that was, and Irenia, you didn't have to work in the fields like I did. I'm talking 14 hours in the field from 5 in the morning till sundown.
I may not have had it hard as you, but I did start working at 8 years old.
Okay.
And I left when I graduated from high school. So every summer we had to work in the fields.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and so for those of you who aren't familiar with this history, of course, again, for those just joining us now, we're in a conversation for the lecture entitled Indipinos of the Central Valley, in conversation with Auntie Wanda and Auntie Irenia Quitiqit.
Well, I was told in the Philippines, Q is K. So
yeah, so I think I say
so we say
Quitiqit, but they say Quitiqit, yeah.
American style.
And they are half Ilokano and Pomo.
Mhm.
And we shared earlier, their father arrived in 1920. And so for folks who aren't familiar with that history, the bulk of sort of Filipino migration. So Filipinos had been migrating in different ways to North America. But the bulk of migration that really began kind of an initial major wave of Filipino migration to what we now call the United States happened under U.S. colonial rule of the Philippines. The Philippines had been colonized in 1898, and Filipinos were imported as low-wage workers from the Philippines to work here. They faced intense discrimination, not unlike what we're experiencing now. The anti-immigrant sentiment, the anti-brown sentiment that exists definitely has long roots in this country. But they found ways to create community. And one of the ways they created community and were able to raise families was through intermarriage with Native American women. And so we're hearing this story of how this family came together. So the next question, so we heard a little bit about how when and how your parents met. Actually, if it's okay to kind of
That's all right.
diverge just a little bit, you had mentioned some of the experience of violence, really, that your dad experienced as a worker here in Lake County.
Well,
you can share that.
Yes, in Lake County, the Filipinos, during my father's time were the ones who they were fighters, and they fought for their rights amid this chaotic white racism that they faced in California. And one of those was if they spoke up, and they were attacked for it. So my father was working in a pear shed, wasn't it, in Upper Lake? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And apparently the Filipinos there were raising their voices about work. And how did Stevie put it? My brother had related the story.
To have more better wages.
Yeah, better wages. And so I guess my father must have said something out of turn or something, but he was removed from the group and taken out into the pear orchard and was beaten, and nearly I guess they were going to lynch him, but there was a sheriff's department. I guess somebody from the shed, must have called the police, and they saved his life. So he, from that day on, he swore no white man was ever going to do that to him again.
Mhm.
And he somehow later on in years, I guess Stephen said that. This, I'm when I say Stephen, that's my brother, my older brother. He said he got that. He didn't know when he got that gun. He had a pistol, and you know, being an immigrant, just carrying a pistol so that no white man would ever do that to him again. And he was adamant about that. And when he told this story, his body would just jerk, you know, he was very expressive and animated when he told that story, but he never forgot that story. And my father was demanded respect. And if you did not respect him, well, then, you know, you got, you know, he would react to people who did not respect him. Because that is the one thing that my parents did teach us and display to us. We treat everybody who came into our house with respect. And I think that's part of the biggest part of the Filipino culture and the native culture too, is anybody who comes into your house, you know, you feed them.
Right.
And that's what we had to do. So we had all kinds of characters coming into our house from my father would bring to our house. And we had to, you know, treat them like a king and a queen. You know, so we didn't even know them, some of them. Anyway, so that was the one thing I think that I grasped from both my parents was respect, even if they didn't like these people or persons.
Well, picking up on that, so just to continue to talk about the ways that your parents expressed or passed on their cultures to you and your siblings, maybe if you can share a story or memories from your childhood that highlight your connection. And maybe if you can kind of pick up on that, Auntie Irenia.
Well, first thing that comes to mind is the food. We grew up like eating Filipino food. And my father was a really excellent cook. I've never known any other Filipino who cooks like him. I try to imitate his recipes. But yeah, the food was really a big part of growing up. And my mother, once in a while, will get tired of that food because she liked to eat beans once in a while, potatoes, and, you know, standard type American food. And that was a treat for us to have. That was a real treat. So, so that was one. The other was the history, just, you know, learning about the history where I can about the Filipinos. And over time, in my years growing up, I would connect to different Filipino, you know, friends that I met during my lifetime and try to get a little bit of more idea about his life and, you know, Filipino life, culture, because he wasn't very communicative. By the time I came around, I was like number 15 in line. So I didn't have very much communication with him, like talking about story, you know, having stories with him and that kind of thing. The older siblings had more of that than I had. By the time I was born, I was 50, he was 57.
Wow.
So he should have been my grandfather, right? So so the history was, you know, a big part of that. And you know, and the idea of always staying in touch and taking care of your family, that was like really embedded.
Well, you could maybe even also share about, go ahead, your
Yeah,
mom
I wanted
as
to add
well.
about the food. Where we grew up right on the Sound King River, or a tributary of the
Old River.
It was called Old River in the Delta, which was a tributary of the San Joaquin River and Sacramento River when they met and went out into the ocean. But we subsisted on fish. My father was a real good fisherman. And we subsisted on fish, fresh fish, all year round. And he would catch a huge, big bass, I don't know, striped bass out of the river. And he would, you know, people would hear about it on the island. He caught this big fish, and he was always the one who caught the biggest one. And but we ate striped bass, we ate catfish, we ate perch. Those were the three main fish we ate all year round, pretty much. and my father cooked it in all kinds of ways.
I also like to mention about his garden.
Yeah. Oh, you talk about
he threw this beautiful garden, which close to an acre, maybe three-quarters acre, but it was huge, and it was all Asian vegetables like bitter melon and all those kind of things. And he would sell it to. He was kind of an entrepreneur in his own way. He would take them in and sell them to the restaurants in Stockton, because at that time none of those vegetables were available. And I don't know where he got the seeds, but he would rejuvenate those seeds and propagate them every year. So he had a full, you can see in the picture behind him, that was his garden. But he would work like 12 to 14 hours a day. Then he'll come back at late in the evening and work in his garden late in the night. This is all during the summertime, of course. So the garden was really always, I love the garden too. So I tried to do as much gardening as I could, but I would say that was a big contribution too.
Yeah, tell us more about that. So bitter melon.
Yeah, well, he wouldn't let us into the garden unless we were told to water it or weed it. That's it. And but if he saw us in his garden, what are you doing in there? I mean, like he did not. Anyway, his garden was his pleasure, and I believe that made him feel good about feeding his family.
Yeah, that was part of the sustainability.
Yeah,
was the food. That's what kind of kept us all strong and healthy.
All summer long.
Yeah, we were in we were in a previous conversation that involved their brothers, and one of the comments that they had made was like, I think it was Uncle Stevie saying that he'd never had a headache in his life.
Yeah, it was really funny that he would say that, because I asked him just maybe a few months ago. I says, "You guys are asking both of them, Godfrey and Stevie." I said, "You ever get headaches?" And they said, "No." Both of them said no, and I said, "I don't either." I says, "Now, if there's a woman wearing strong perfume, I'll get a headache, and stuff like that, but not in general did I ever get headaches." And I think it had a lot to do with our eating bitter melon all our lives. I still eat it. I gotta have bitter melon. Every time she goes to Sacramento, I say, "Go to the Asian market and bring back some bitter melon." So I still eat the foods my father. Fresh fish is difficult to get, but I get it once in a while. But my brother still fish. And my mother, through her time in the Indian boarding school, she learned American ways. And so she made sure we had a turkey. We had turkey only once a year, and that was Thanksgiving. We had she'd go out and find the biggest turkey, and she'd spend hours cleaning and preparing it. And it was just really delicious, and that was the one time we ate turkey, was Thanksgiving. That was the only time. And my father would always kind of scoff, again, that American white food. But
I also wanted to note that my mother was also she was actually a very good cook too.
Oh, yes.
But she also did a lot of traditional cooking, and she collected edible, vegetable and wild edibles out in the fields or whatever. And she, liked to dry fish the Pomo way, and she shared a lot of that with us as well.
Yeah, I hear that too. That's really, really interesting, especially given the fact that she had been abducted to erase all of her connection to her culture, but she kept things up. And so tell us maybe a little bit about the drying of the fish or other dishes or the kinds of vegetables she found.
Well, she would get like fish. I think sometimes some of her family members would come and visit. They would give her fish, and also this the fish
from Lake County.
Sure,
and this fish from what my father taught, like people wouldn't eat carp because it's considered a trash fish, but she loved carp.
Yeah,
because she knew the carp down there, and Lake County had carp too, so she would clean it and dry it on the coastline, and that was like she just loved that. I don't remember really eating it so much, but
my father also did that because we had carp in the river, and every once in a while he would catch one and he would clean it and dry it. and then you'd put it in a broiler. It's just delicious.
Yeah.
But the one food that the memory that I have as a collective thing for all of our family was when we went out and picked the green mustard leaves. We ate that as soon as spring came. Those leaves came out. And we had a little, it was like in front of before we moved into this home, we lived in the same camp compound that the Bracero men, the Mexican workers from Mexico, through the Bracero program, they lived in the same camp. So there was a little stretch of land where all this wild mustard green leaves would grow, and we would all go out there and pick them. And that was the only time that I remember as a family we did something together, because we definitely were not the Leave It to Beaver family, No nuclear activism in our family.
I don't know if some of these young ones know the Leave It to Beaver reference. But if you don't,
look it up.
I'll give it to you. But it's like American family.
I think it all had to do with survival and food sovereignty. That's happening then, and it's it's happening now too, but not as scarce as it's not scarce. But back then, it was like we all centered around food. Always picking and gathering, or fishing, or hunting, or always around food.
No, food sovereignty is such an important issue, actually, that it may feel as if things are plentiful now, but within like climate crisis, so many of the fishes, for example, maybe that your mom grew up with, like the native hitch. Of course, I know Auntie Irenia, that you've done like work around saving the Lake County hitch, and we'll share that in resources. But some of these really important cultural foods really disappearing.
Yes, well, for instance, the river that we grew up on, there's no way I would go into that river today and gather the clams that we used to eat out of the river. They're little black clams. Then I think Irene and your generation sold those clams to the Filipinos. And it was just normal for us to go into this muddy bottom and get the clams. I wouldn't put my foot in that lake river right now, because it's gone through a lot of contamination from the field, all the pesticides and all that sort of thing. And but when we would go down to the river, and it was low tide, my mom would show us how to pick the tule shoots, the baby shoots, and she taught us to eat those. And I remember that vividly. And but no way would I go into Clear Lake and eat these tule shoots, And so they have their own ways that they that have stayed with me all my life. And it's against all odds on their survival in this country. That this is the one thing that they gave us, that all my brothers and sisters have been successful in whatever they did. My older sister graduated from UC Berkeley. My younger sister graduated from UC Berkeley and got her master's. And when you can do that for your children, when your children can do that, then you made it as a parent, And so my mother was very proud of all of us because we had held jobs for years and years, and she really was proud of us. And you can't ask it that much more from a parent,
Just going back, talking about the food, and I know that one of the stories or something you had shared, for those who don't know, that on one of the other hats I wear is as a sort of a small farmer, and you had identified pigweed, right? It's a California native plant, and I didn't know until you taught me that it is edible, and that your dad
my father went
into Filipino.
It was a salad. Yeah.
How do you feel? I'm guessing that your parents must have just,
Well, I think the Indians ate
knowledge.
that as well.
Right.
You know,
Or my mom might have
yeah.
introduced it to him.
And then
Yeah,
made
yeah,
it into something
yes,
kind of Filipino.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But everything would, soy sauce based and garlic and vinegar, basic ingredients to everything in Filipino food. And that's what we had. He did not do so to speak, fancy Filipino food. But when he cooked the dishes like adobo and fish soup and what else, and made I would say, yeah,
yeah.
and the sushi, the raw fish, we learned from him to eat raw fish, shrimp. What else? There was another one, shrimp and squid. Yeah, and so we grew up with Asian food per se, the Filipino style way. And and I love that food to this day, and my brother, when he told the story when he was in Vietnam, he saw many American, that ugly American side of the soldier. They would put down the food there because they couldn't handle the Asian food in the villages. And my brother was basically invited in because he loved the Asian food, because he knew it, he could eat it. And so he was treated much better than the other ones. And because he could eat that food. And so, these, you don't have to grow up with an elaborate upbringing, and I mean by having, educated parents. But my parents were just real and loving in their own way, But when you discover their history, what they had to, what all odds against them, that they're able to raise 16 children together and feed us and educate us and clothe us and shelter us, against all odds, was quite a feat.
Yeah.
And the ethics that my father brought into our work in the fields now, not in an office or whatever, blue collar work. We learned our work ethics in the fields because of him. You do a job, you better do it right, or you got to do it over. And farm labor is not easy to do over.
I would say what saved us from like today, if you were living in the city, it's a much harder life.
Yeah.
And I think living out in the country and living on a farm really saved our lives.
Yeah.
And all that land knowledge to know how to eat what the land could provide. Yeah. Well, tell me a bit more. I mean, you kind of are sharing it, right? But how do you identify in terms of your ethnic and cultural background? And to what extent does your kind of mixed race Filipino and Pomo identities shape your sense of yourself and your worldview?
Well, I'll take that question first. I would say I think we had both the best worlds, knowing our cultures really well. And I feel like I know my Filipino culture really well. I've never been to the Philippines, but I feel like I grew up knowing I was Filipino, and I grew up knowing I was Indian. So I think both of them were kind of equal. I don't see them as one stronger than the other. I really tried to delve into learning more about Filipino side in the 1990s, and when I lived in Seattle, and because I know that's where my father came through. And I met a lot of Filipino, because there's a lot more Filipino. I lived in the city, there's a lot more Filipino people, and I just delved into the Filipino side of me up there and learned a lot about the Filipinos. And I even found a relative up there, quite a good relative of the Dons. And so I feel like I see them as equal.
Yeah. Speaking of Seattle, it's interesting because although this really together, our work together is, I think, probably one of the first times that we're kind of documenting and lifting up the history of Indipinos in Northern California. But in Seattle and specifically around, I guess it's the Yakima Reservation and Bainbridge Island, there's been some great history done on the Indipinos there. So hoping that we can kind of really capture these more of your stories in Northern California.
And that's why I first heard about the Indipinos when I was up there, and that was in late 1980s. And I first heard the word Indipinos. I didn't hear it again until I met you here in California. But I always said I was the Indipino anyway. You know?
We just didn't know the term. But I always claim my Filipino. I always say, well, I'm half Pomo and half Filipino. You know, because I worked a lot in San Francisco and worked with a lot of other Filipino people, mostly women. And so I just, when I'm with Filipinos, I really feel Filipino. And with I'm Native, I just, and like what Irenia said, we have bust of both worlds. And I think the Filipino and Native culture are very close. Both are, live off the land, basically, and, worship the land. And that comes through, into their life, and children are precious to them. Filipinos love children, and Native people, we love our children too. And so I think there's just a very close similarity in the cultures, except language, And but yeah, I think that the food and work ethics from both cultures are the connecting. And politics too. Politics, definitely, because I think I'm the only one in the family ever became really more political. Irenia was activist in some certain ways, but my two sisters were also activists, but I was more political in the conventional, in the national politics and the state politics and the county politics. So I would ask my mom, I says, why do you love this? Why do you love President Kennedy so much? And you love this senator? I said, why do you have pictures of them? I said, these white men, what did they do for us? He didn't even collect welfare for us. My parents would not collect welfare. That's why we just worked. And she could never explain it, but I figured it out on my own. It was a thing called hope. That's what it was. And I think in her generation, this was what she went through in the boarding school, what she went through when she returned to the tribe after the boarding school. I think, I think what got her through it was hope. There's something as good has got to come out of all of this,
Also, I think the point about assimilation too was very strong on both points, but it was like I could never really pinpoint it, but my father really wanted us to be educated, and he would make us go to school. And my mom was the opposite.
Right. She wanted us right by her.
She wanted us to stay home and hang out with her and just do things with her. But she also, we had to go to school.
I can imagine the trauma too of what happened to her.
Yeah, I'm sure that was part of it, but she knew the importance of education because my mother, because the boarding school was her only education, she had beautiful handwriting. And I think she kind of handed that down because my other brother who, from her first marriage, he didn't graduate from high school either, but he had beautiful handwriting. She kind of, I think, inherited those of us who like to write. I feel like I inherited from her because when I was going into the first grade, I wanted to learn to read and write. I wanted to write. And so she gave us because Irenia kind of, missed this part, but we couldn't go to the library. We didn't do that. She didn't take us to the library. Oh, you're going to learn something today. That it wasn't like that at all. So she could afford to buy magazines. So she bought my brother Field and Stream, which is a fishing outdoor magazine, and my brothers who liked racing, and they got racing magazines. My sister got all the Hollywood magazines, and My mom loved to read detectives, true detectives, and you know, and Ebony magazine. That was the one that made me see the world. You know, other cultures. You know, so that small effort on her part, you know, played a big part in our education.
Yeah, and for a younger audience, I don't know if Ebony magazine is still around, but that's a black magazine.
Yeah, it's a black magazine. So she would get buy that magazine, those magazines whenever she had the money. And my father, he could not read or write English, and nor hardly speak it, you know. So but Dad was a mathematician. It just came naturally because he during this bracero program on the farm, when we would the Mexican farm workers would come to pick the tomatoes. That was like a 2 month, 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 months project where the workers would come and they would send about not even 200 men, and all single men, and they lived in the camp there. They had their own beds, and you know, blah blah blah. But he could account. He took care of each man's production on when they picked tomatoes. If the boss man came and said, "I need 11 or to 12 loads of tomatoes," we're talking about a big truck with one big flatbed truck. And these boxes of tomatoes were like, the wooden boxes were like, how many pounds? 10, 15, 10 pounds each. Were wood, heavy, strong wood. And when you packed them with the tomatoes, they were up to like 25 to 30 pounds. So each of these boxes had to be stacked at the end of the row. And the men would produce my father would tell them, we need this. And he would get the men to produce these numbers. He would take care of their time card and calculate their boxes, and that would be their pay. He just knew how to produce. And those men, those bracero men, respected him very much because he treated them equally and you know, with respect, and he demanded it back. And not once do I recall, and you know, and I worked in the fields alongside these bracero men, you know, for many years, you know, up until I couldn't anymore at the age of 15. And we didn't have not 1 ounce of problem with these men. And my sister was a beautiful teenager at the time too. So, not once, that
your mother cooked for them.
And my mother cooked for them, and she would, you know, they loved the beans and tortillas, and she would make them other dishes, whatever she cooked. I don't remember all what she cooked, but she'd give them chicken and pork and whatnot, you know.
I wonder if they ate Filipino food too.
No, they couldn't cook the Filipino food. Even though she could cook Daddy's dishes, but she left all that cooking to Daddy. And you know, come home and cook dinner sometimes, you know, because that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
But she learned to cook his food just like he liked it.
Yeah. Well, now, what do you think are maybe 2 or 3, and you don't have to do as many, 2 or 3 of the most important lessons? I think my dog just joined this conversation. Roxy, what 2 or 3 of the most important lessons on love and solidarity between Asians and Native Americans, based on your family history, that you may want to share for a younger generation that goes on the line?
Well, I think it's your family, the family, and I see a lot in the different ethnic groups in California. That family is the foremost. And my parents is, you know, we were poor, but they did everything to give us what we needed, and taught us to respect that. You know, they were not outward with their love. You know, I don't recall getting a hug from my father for doing a good job, working in the fields, laboring the fields for 14 hours, you know. But my mother, even both of them, it was kind of like a nonverbal communication. We just knew that they loved us, and their teachings were one of respect and do a good job and treat people good. And I think those were the basic things. And
I would also
go ahead.
add on appreciative of culture, appreciate each other's culture.
Yeah.
That I always appreciate different cultures.
Yeah.
I look forward to learning more about people's cultures. So I think because we're strong in sharing their cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah. They invited all kinds of people into I mean, it was limited number of people, but the characters that my parents were friends with, they were characters, and they kind of like enriched our lives because they were fun, and we remembered them. I remember all of them, and some of them were drinkers with them, and they partied, and but that was it, but my father belonged to the Filipino lodge in Stockton, and we would go to the social box dances, and my sister, she would make us look like dresses. We had to dance, and that we were kind of skeptical and didn't want to do it, or felt like we were being prostituted or something. But he made us get out there and dance, because the dancing was really a community social dance, and lots of women and children were there, and the Filipino workers and old people, young people. It was a community. The social box was a community affair.
Yes.
And the girls would dance with everybody, with children, with women, and old people and young people, and they would pay. It was like a 10 cents a dime a dance, but it was more than that. They could put up any money they wanted, and $1 was the least amount,
and the money went
for just the world. They just go up and dance you around, and then pay money, and so. That money would go to the lodge, half of it, and then half of it would go to my father, So we always, Mama, when are we going to get something out of this? All we would get was a gift that they gave us, like handkerchiefs or something like that. It was funny. We enjoyed it because it got us out of the fields, and gave us, so without that, I would, it was a social.
Yeah.
So he provided that for us.
I just had one last thing I wanted to share. Was on that last question. I think I was learning photography. I think it was in high school. And my father knew I liked photography, and he would ask me in the next few years after learning this, he would ask me to document the field workers, the Filipino field workers that worked out there in the field. So at the end of the season, we would have a big party, and everybody would be, it's like a potluck, everybody bring food, and it was like the best food ever. But I would have to document all those workers before that big party. So he did appreciate me, a little bit. Photography that I felt appreciated. That he let me do that.
And it seems like he must have maybe understood the importance of people being able to have their lives kind of documented. Do you have any of that film? That's a great history.
No, I do have pictures of that.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Those are the ones on the planter, on the tomato planter.
Yes. I did have some photography shows in my younger life. Some shows, and I think I did a show on that.
That would be amazing, because we are in this moment, right, when all of our histories, we already know a lot of our history is already invisible. It's denied actively. So any ways that we're able to get some of this, these artifacts, so important. So we'll have to follow
it is. This photo, speaking about photos, this photo of my father in his garden, that was taken by a white girlfriend of mine. I brought her out to the farm. She wanted to see where I lived, where I was going every weekend, And so I brought, her name was Karen, and I brought her out, and she was always taking photos. And I said, Daddy, she wants to take your photo. And we got this beautiful photo of him. He would never do this for us. But he did this for her. Look at him smiling like a big smile, so happy to pose for her. And so that's the picture. So when she gave it to me, I reproduced it and gave it to all my brothers and sisters. So that's the photo we have. That's him. That takes photo says a lot about him.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I wanted to circle back to just you talked about for yourselves kind of how growing up with the both cultures kind of shaped your worldview. It seems like it really had an impact too on one of your now deceased sisters, and she was playing a role as an activist at Alcatraz.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
Oh,
yes.
a little bit of that.
Yes. That's my one of my.
Can kind of be a closing.
She was the oldest between my mother and father. Her name was Luana, and Luana was very. She was an artist to the heart. She did oil painting. She did abalone making. She developed this necklace I have on. She developed this acorn necklace, and she shaped all her own abalone. And she did leather dresses, and her work has been purchased by many people. So when Alcatraz began, the director of the Native Studies at UC Berkeley said, "Let's go," and she and my other sister followed. But I think Luana went first. And so while she was there, she was an organizer. She did a lot, and she's one of the unsung heroes that I feel came out of Alcatraz. So this is her quote that she put in this. She found this old accounting book, the big one that's cloth bound, and all the yellow accounting paper in it. It was a big ledger. And so this is what she wrote in that ledger. "This book found in the old boiler room by myself, brought to the pier for registration of new residents and visitors on December 7th, 1970, Luana Quitiqit." And so she was the one who started this ledger book. This ledger is now in the Gene Autry Museum, and you can just go to the Gene Autry Museum site and click on the Alcatraz ledger. And this book housed hundreds of signatures of natives from all over the country and visitors, and even some celebrities are in there. And this book she kept for up until she died, which was in 2011. 2011. And she kept that book. And she would let some people look at it once in a while, and they would find their parent. And, it was very emotional. This book is a very emotional thing for people to leaf through and see a name there of their family member 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So after she died, her son, Alan Harrison, he kept up her work about Alcatraz, because he knew a lot of what he grew up. He was the child on Alcatraz, and so it stayed with him all his life. And so this book, after she died, he sold it to the former chairman of the Yochadihi tribe that owns the Cache Creek Resort Hotel, and he bought it. And he was also chairman, and he's gone now too. But he was also chairman of the Gene Autry Museum. And that's where the ledger is. And when you go on the site, you could flip through that book and see the different signatures.
People who came through during the time that it was occupied.
So now,
reoccupied.
Yeah. So on the 50th anniversary of Alcatraz, the LA Times, the Los Angeles Times, drew from that book my mother's quote that she wrote in that book. And you can read about that too. But this is the quote that my mother wrote, in which I'm just so, it's always makes me feel emotional. But anyway, here's what she wrote. "We are about to leave for Alcatraz, maybe for the last time, to this beautiful little island, which means a little something which no one will ever understand my feelings." And that's what that was done. She wrote that in November 1970. And, you've heard me, Irene and I, talk about our parents and our mother. She was just a little old Pomo woman who raised 16 children and had that boarding school experience. And who would have thought she would end up in the LA Times? I mean, she would just laugh about it. We told her that if she was alive today, she'd probably just say, "Oh, that's okay," or, "That's nice," and laugh about it. because my mother had a sense of humor that, that old Indian style sense of humor. And that's what I loved about her.
Well, the big thing was she did raise a family.
Yeah.
A family with certain kinds of values,
Yeah.
a certain sense of themselves, and people
Yeah.
who ended up going on to really
Yeah.
try to contribute to
Yeah.
preserve that culture.
Yes, and
in
here
so many
she,
different ways.
and here her quote
that's a huge
is
shock.
a historic document
Yeah.
now, and that's when you go to that website.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Yes.
We come to a close for this part. I mean, we at the Amado Kai Initiative are going to continue to collect these stories, not just from the Quitiqit family, but apparently there are so many stories, in fact, of these connections between Filipinos and Pomos, and not just Pomos, but other communities. In fact, the tribal chair currently of the Robinson Rancheria of Pomo is half Vietnamese and Pomo. So there are all these stories of our communities coming together that we find really important to celebrate. Yeah. So we'll continue to document this story and other stories and share them with you all. Wanted to kind of also let people know about our next event, which is actually this Sunday, which is a virtual screening of Earthseed, a documentary film by the People's Kitchen Collective. You have the information there, and we'll be sending the information out on email. But please remember to mark your calendars. Yeah. It's Valentine's weekend, but we feel like it's important to not just celebrate romantic love, but community love and love for our people, especially in this moment of so much hate, wanting to support the ways that we love each other and continue to support the thriving of our cultures and communities. So thank you all for joining us.
Can I just say one?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just want to say I want to thank Dr. Robyn Rodriguez.
Thank you
for giving us this opportunity, because you just don't realize how emotional and important this is for my family, for my great grandchildren, and all my nieces and nephews. That they'll have this forever, and it means a lot. And so I want to thank the Amado Kaya initiative for doing this and keeping the world better. Thank you. Thank you, Robyn.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And so please fill out also the email form. Appreciate folks filling that out. And again, we'll see you all on the weekend and at upcoming events. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. That's so
how did it sound, John?
I think it sounded good.
Really?
Turn this one off. But gosh, it's so funny. Every time we talk, there's so many new things that come up, What? That quick? Like this